Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This afternoon I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror film from the USA, English language, released in the year 2020, directed by Osgood Perkins, and this film is called Gretel and Hansel. So Gretel and Hansel is a retelling of the age-old story of Hansel and Gretel. You've got a movie that is set many, many years ago, and this area that these characters live in has been decimated by famine. So there is no food to eat and the situation is desperate, so you've got Hansel and Gretel, who are siblings, sister and brother, and the mother. So the mother says to Gretel that there's a job opportunity, that if she takes the job, this is an opportunity for them to live a better life. So when Gretel gets to the house, she realises that she's going to be a housekeeper for an elderly gentleman. But straight away she doesn't like this guy. She believes that he has sinister intentions for her. So she leaves the house, she goes back to the mother. Upon telling her that she didn't want the job, the mother flips out and she kicks Hansel and Gretel out. So she never wants to see them again, and so they're left to fend for themselves in the woods. They're starving. They got to the stage where they're going to give up, but this is where they stumble across a house. Now this house appears to be empty, but when they look inside, they see a lot of food on the table. And so their bellies are rumbling, and the bellies are basically dictating what they do, and what they do is break in and start eating. But this is where they meet the elderly woman who owns the house. Now she says that it's okay that they broke in. She understands they can stay as long as they want and they can eat as much as they want. So this is a situation that they weren't expecting. So Gretel says that she will work off this woman's goodwill. She will do housework and basically do chores outside in order to repay her. So it appears to be okay, but then as each day passes, strange things start to occur that makes Gretel think that there is more to this woman than she first thought, and they may have passed a point of no return and escape might be impossible. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on Gretel and Hansel. This is a film that I didn't really have any expectations for, and I come into it bracing myself for a disappointment. Now the reason is because a lot of people didn't like it. It has been panned by a lot of critics. I know better than to judge a film based on outside influence, but it's very difficult to do. So expectations weren't high, but the reason why I was still excited coming into the movie is that Osgood Perkins was the director. Now Osgood Perkins created another movie called The Black Coat's Daughter, aka February, which I really liked and a lot of people hated. So for that reason I was hoping that this is going to be a similar experience, a movie that I would love that I didn't really expect to. So after watching this movie, I will say I didn't love the film, but there were aspects that I really loved. And so I thought as though this is a lot better than a lot of people are saying. And if you're like me and you're umming and ahhing about whether or not to see it, if you are a fan of atmospheric horror films, then I think Gretel and Hansel is definitely a movie you have to check out. Now atmosphere is what Osgood Perkins does better than anyone else at the moment. Atmosphere is what made The Black Coat's Daughter so good, and atmosphere is by far the biggest positive to Gretel and Hansel, as this is a film that has been drenched in gothic atmosphere in the colouring, the very dreary visuals, and those visuals that slowly creep under your skin. It's the invisible net, it's the invisible presence that is the slow burn tension that Osgood Perkins does in a very, very deliberate way. And so as the movie starts to progress, you can sense the desperation based on the fact that it's a desolate setting. Yes, in the woods, it's a very enchanting sort of woods, but you know that something sinister is going on. It's because of the colouring, because of the soundtrack, and everything, as I said, that you can't see, but that your senses rely on. And so as this movie starts to creep up, the snowballing sort of invisible presence is behind you, and it's getting bigger and bigger, and you can start to feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Now this is a cautionary tale ultimately about things that are too good to be true, and usually it is too good to be true, and in this case that idea that it's too good to be true is the creepiest part, is that when they get to this house, this is everything that they could ever have imagined, is that they're saved, they're eating, they've got a roof over their head, but there must be a catch. And that feeling of there must be a catch is the creepiest part of this movie, and it's one of the creepiest experiences that I've had, is because as the movie slowly progresses, it slowly snowballs into something very, very dark, and there are visuals here that are very freaky. There is hardly any violence in the movie, which is something I really appreciated. It relies on stuff that made Alfred Hitchcock so good. This is stuff that can't be done by directors who don't have any talent. There's a lot of directors out there who are very lazy. They would just use excessive gore, nudity, and that was basically a substitution for this sort of stuff, the stuff that is just slowly embracing you to a point where you feel as though you're running out of air. And that's exactly what I got from Gretel and Hansel. I thought the acting was very good. The atmosphere was phenomenal, and it just felt like a film where it was a hopeless situation. But as I said, that light at the end of the tunnel, was it a light? And was that light put in there for a strategic reason? And that strategic reason has something to do with the benefit of this elderly woman. Now, if you know the story of Hansel and Gretel, you probably know what this elderly woman's all about, but it still had suspense, is because it didn't have jump scares, but that slow turning tension, I just thought, how is this going to transpire? Is that I kind of know where it's going to go, but ultimately that journey to that point I thought was really worth the effort, and so that was very good. And the way the movie is told is very different. It's an age-old story. This is not the first film that's taken on this story, and so it's very easy to get lost in recycling ideas, but Osgood Perkins actually goes out of his way to try and make a different experience, and I thought for the most part it worked. It wasn't holding your hand for the first 3/4, and that's something that I can understand a lot of people not liking, is that we like our traditional stories. We like to be told what a movie is about. But for me, I love films that make it, it forces you to use your intelligence. It forces you to think about it. It's not holding your hand, and if it's not holding your hand, it's not giving you that sense of control. And I thought that the majority of this movie, there was no real control. I didn't know exactly where this director was taking me in a story that has been told so many times before. So that was another plus that Gretel and Hansel had. If I have a problem with Gretel and Hansel, is that I didn't really like the last quarter of this movie. Now, yes, it does make it up for your interpretation, but it kind of limits that interpretation. So there is a way that the movie kind of goes into exposition to explain things, whereas the majority of the film didn't really explain it. So I felt as though it had a lot of confidence building that sense of dread, building that sense of ambiguity, but at the end of it, it kind of just, it fell into its shell a little bit and said, we better explain it just in case people aren't getting this. And so it's holding a hand to a degree, but it still makes you think as to what this movie was about, and as I said, that cautionary element that the movie has. But ultimately, I thought it would have been a lot better if it just demonstrated the same confidence in the first 3/4 that is lacking in the last quarter. And so I thought the movie ended fairly weakly, and that was, to me, the only real disappointment I had from this movie, in what was, as I said, a movie that was much better than a lot of people give it credit for. It is a very simplistic film, but this simplicity in the way it tells its story is more than made up for through the visuals and through the atmosphere. It's atmospherically an experience, and so that sounds like your kind of thing. Definitely go out there and see this movie. But I thought it would have been a lot better if it had a lot more ambiguity. Although it does still have some degree of interpretation, it would have been a lot better if it just kind of didn't explain itself as much as it does towards the finish line. So this is a movie that I liked a lot more than I was expecting, and as a result of that, I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you there. Bye.